My name is Captain Luke Grant. I'm 38, stationed out of Fort Hood, and I've spent the last 15 years in the U.S. Army, most of them building and managing logistics systems that keep forward bases running like clockwork. I don't usually talk about my work outside command briefings, but what happened that Monday morning? That's the kind of thing that sticks with you. I hadn't even taken off my cap when it started. 6 straight weeks of deployment prep, server integration, and load testing a system that could track fuel, food, and gear for 300 soldiers across 2 states. And the minute I walked into the Monday debrief, still running on energy drinks and half a protein bar, it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's story. There he was, Josh. Shiny haircut, clean boots, polished nameplate, and a voice like he'd read one book on management and thought he'd mastered the art of war. He was standing at the whiteboard like he owned the air in the room, holding my deployment flowchart like it was some child's crayon sketch. "Is this what we're calling operational planning now?" he asked the room, slow and loud, like the rest of us were hard of hearing. No one laughed. Not the junior engineers, not the comms lead, and definitely not Sergeant Ortiz, who once cracked a joke during an IED brief just to break tension. This silence wasn't awkward, it was tactical. I stood there, hands still raw from the server rack install 2 days prior, and I could feel my pulse behind my eyes. 14-hour days. Systems hardened against cyber attacks. Back-end logistics clean enough to run without a single human input for 36 hours. And this kid, who still smelled like ROTC orientation, was shredding it for optics. It wasn't critique, it was performance. Josh Fairchild, 25. Just out of Stanford. No field hours, no real command, but his dad wore 3 stars on his shoulder, and that meant Josh got to parachute into our division with a freshly pressed title, Strategic Operations Liaison, whatever that meant. To him, it meant he got to walk into a room full of people who'd been running systems under fire and treat us like underperforming interns. I didn't say a word in that room. I took a seat, I opened my laptop, I acted like I hadn't just been slapped in front of my own team. But in that moment, something settled in my chest. Not anger, not humiliation, something colder. The kind of calm you feel right before everything breaks. I knew this wasn't about performance. It was about erasure. And I'd seen enough command turnovers to know exactly where this story was heading. It didn't take long after that Monday blow-up for things to shift. Josh started showing up everywhere. Logistics syncs, system updates, daily scrums. He never had a laptop, just a coffee in hand and that smug tilt to his head, like he was watching a bunch of kids build sandcastles and waiting to kick one over. The first few times, I thought maybe he was trying to learn the ropes, get a feel for the ground. But it wasn't that. At the Q2 systems review, I presented our roadmap. 6 months of refactoring planned out down to the hour. Midway through, he raised a hand like we were in a classroom. "Why are we still cleaning legacy code? Why not just rebuild with a newer stack?" I glanced at the colonel, who didn't say a word. I answered anyway. Stability, continuity, systems hardened in the field. He nodded like he understood, but I could see it already. He wasn't here to understand. He was here to rebrand. The worst part wasn't the questions. It was the language. He stopped calling me Captain Grant. He didn't even say Luke. He started calling me the vendor, in front of my team, in front of command. Can the vendor get us the rollout timeline? Let the vendor own this deployment. I was sitting right there. Same uniform, same boots. 4 stripes and 15 years in. And this kid who never deployed a day in his life called me a contractor. Like I was a name on an invoice. At first I laughed it off. Thought it was ignorance. Then I realized it wasn't. It was strategy. He was reframing me in front of my own people, not as a leader, not as the architect of the entire logistics backbone, just a technician, a hired hand. I watched my team glance over at me during meetings, unsure whether to speak. Some stopped looping me into Slack threads. Others CC'd Josh on questions they used to bring directly to me. It's a strange thing to be erased while still sitting in the chair. My badge still scanned, my report still went up the chain. But every week, the room got colder. I could feel the shift. People looked to him for approval, not because he earned it, but because his last name guaranteed it. He brought in one of his own, too. fresh-faced second lieutenant with a resume full of buzzwords and zero command time, said she'd help optimize our processes. First week in, she crashed the logistics dashboard with a misconfigured script. I spent 72 hours rebuilding it. Didn't log the hours, didn't complain, just got it working. And when I handed it off, Josh said, "We're lucky to have young minds willing to move fast." That was it. No acknowledgement, no thanks. Just a pat on his own back through someone else's sweat. I'd built that system over 4 years, from field kits to network failovers. Every script tested under pressure, every decision tied to real-world deployment. And now, I was being rewritten out of it, branded as support staff in a system I designed. There's a kind of betrayal that doesn't come from enemies. It comes from within, from the people who smile at you in meetings, then delete your name from the credits. But I didn't speak up. Not yet. I wasn't quiet out of fear. I was watching, documenting, waiting. Because if there's one thing the military teaches you, it's that when someone starts rewriting history, the truth becomes your only weapon. And I was making damn sure mine stayed sharp. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was waiting on a system update to compile when an email dropped into my inbox. Subject line read, Ops Deck Final V3, sent from a junior analyst named Harris. Probably meant to copy someone else. I opened it out of boredom, half expecting another fluff deck for brass review. By the second slide, my breath caught. The diagram was mine. Not similar, not inspired, identical. Same node placements. Same blue gradient I'd pulled from an old Army field guide. Even the label typo on the West Zone cluster. I stared at the screen, blinking slow, as if maybe the pixels would shift and reveal something else. But they didn't. It was mine. Every line of it. Slide after slide unfolded like pages from my old notebooks. The data flow charts I'd built from scratch in a freezing command tent during that blizzard in Idaho. The stacked schema layouts I'd stayed up 3 nights straight, drawing on a dry erase board no one else wanted to touch. It wasn't just the work. It was the fingerprints, my choices, my logic. All of it stripped down and recast as company assets. And my name? Nowhere. No tag, no mention, no acknowledgement. Just buzzwords like proprietary systems and internal innovation pasted over my backbone. I clicked into the file history. Last edited 2 days ago by Josh Fairchild. My hand stayed frozen on the mouse. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat in that chair with a silence so thick it felt like armor cracking. There's a difference between being ignored and being erased. I could have taken ridicule. I could have handled being sidelined. But this was theft, precision theft. The kind that only happens when someone has access to your work, your habits, your archives, and the gall to take it because they believe no one's watching. I didn't feel angry right away. I felt hollow, like something inside had quietly short-circuited. I scrolled back to the beginning and went through it again, one slide at a time, counting. By slide 12, I stopped. It wasn't worth the tally. I knew what this was now. A rewrite of the past. A version where I never existed. And I wasn't about to let that stand. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in my kitchen, laptop open, half-empty cup of cold coffee beside me, staring at nothing. My mind wasn't racing. It was calculating, quiet, cold, focused. If they were bold enough to steal, I had to be sharp enough to outthink them. I started digging. Old drives, backup folders, offline archives I hadn't touched in years. Dusty corners of cloud storage accounts I barely remembered setting up. Somewhere, I knew there had to be something, a trace, a receipt. I built the first version of the system back in grad school, before my commission, before any chain of command existed. It wasn't Army tech, it was mine. Hours passed, file names blurred. I was starting to doubt myself. What if I'd lost it? What if I'd signed something back then and forgot? In the haze of deployments and relocations, paperwork can slip through cracks. And then I found it. A folder labeled Infracore Stack Old, buried 3 layers deep on an external drive. Inside, a PDF. Dated March 4th, 2012. My name, my signature, my diagrams. It was a USPTO preliminary filing. Simple, not flashy. But it documented the architecture, process logic, and the modular data container system that later became the backbone of everything I deployed. My address was listed, my personal email, filed months before I ever put on the uniform. No cosigner, no employer listed, just me. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt clarity. All this time, I'd been trying to fight for space inside a system I already built, trying to defend my place when, legally, that place was mine from the start. I wasn't out of line, I wasn't paranoid. I had the foundation, and now I had the proof. I opened a new document, titled it plainly, Ownership Leverage. Then I started building a list, not emotional, just facts, dates, names, file paths. The moment shifted in my gut. Not just survival anymore. This was strategy. They forgot the filing. I didn't. And that was going to change everything. The appointment was set for Zone 900. I arrived 20 minutes early. Military legal office, clean walls, framed citations, faint scent of toner and coffee. The kind of place where decisions don't echo. They record. Captain Reed met me in the conference room. Civil affairs with a background in tech contracts. Straightforward, no small talk. He read the filing, quiet at first, then asked the question I was waiting for. Was this submitted before active service? I said yes. He didn't nod or smile, just marked a checkbox, pulled out a confirmation form, and slid it across the table. Sign here. This affirms sole origin of infrastructure IP predating military involvement. The pen in my hand felt heavier than it should. I signed. He scanned, stamped, uploaded. Nothing dramatic, just process. But every movement was deliberate, sharp, legal ground laid out inch by inch like we were setting Claymore wire. Once it was done, he looked up. We'll flag it. If anyone contests, they go through us. That was it. The weight lifted clean. I didn't need applause. I needed leverage, and now I had it. 2 days later, Josh found out. He stormed into my office, face flushed, phone still warm from whatever legal briefing had just blindsided him. Threw the door open so hard it hit the frame. You filed what? I kept typing. Didn't look up. You're interfering with active systems. I stood, slow, deliberate, my tone flat. I filed confirmation of what I created, using my own machine, on my own time, Saturday night, nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, just facts. He tried to push back, threw around words like chain of command, protocol, liability. I let him talk. Then I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a printed copy of the filing record, time-stamped, notarized, and flagged by military counsel. He didn't touch it, just stared. I stepped past him and left the office without saying another word. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to prove anything. The paper spoke louder than I ever could. That was the shift. I wasn't defending anymore. I was documenting, strategizing, moving clean. I wasn't the vendor. I was the architect. And he'd just learned that the hard way. The announcement never came. No official memo, no email from command, just silence. One day there was buzz about a multi-year defense partnership. The next day the air went cold. Communications slowed, briefings postponed, then canceled. The deal vanished like a signal lost in the mountains. No explanation, just static. Josh's name disappeared from the internal directory the following Friday. His calendar wiped, his access revoked. Not a farewell note, not a debrief. He was there 1 week, gone the next. The same base where he strutted through corridors now moved without his shadow. No one asked questions. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe they already knew enough. The funny thing about collapses is that they rarely happen with a bang. Most of the time, they fold in on themselves. Quiet, surgical. By then, I had stopped watching. I had work to do. My nights were spent finalizing the dossier. No victory laps, no drinks raised, just red ink, clean timelines, and a folder that told the story without me needing to speak. Every night, I updated the last few entries, labeled, archived, backed up twice. Not for revenge, for record, for clarity. I didn't broadcast what happened, didn't leak a single detail. The ones who needed to see it already had. The rest didn't matter. I wasn't chasing vindication. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I had the truth. And in the long run, that speaks louder than any accusation. I stood firm because I knew the ground beneath me was mine, and when the tremors hit, I didn't move. There's no glory in watching someone implode, only a quiet satisfaction in knowing you didn't have to push. They did it themselves, All I did was refuse to be erased. That's not vengeance. That's survival. And I carried it out the same way I built it. Clean, quiet, precise. The first time I walked into the new ops center, no one asked what I was doing there. The receptionist stood when I gave my name, walked me to a conference room already prepped. Inside, the lead analyst shook my hand like he already knew the whole story. They laid the offer on the table, not just a role, a seat where decisions were made, not just followed. Technical Director of Infrastructure Transition. My title printed clean, no need to explain or justify. The binder in front of me held numbers I didn't flinch at, clauses I read line by line. I circled what needed fixing, highlighted what needed clarity, scribbled a single note in the margin, retain all existing IP ownership. When they came back with revised terms, they didn't push back. They accepted it like it was never in question. That told me everything I needed to know about who I was dealing with. There was no speech, no sales pitch, just two sides recognizing what the other brought to the table. When I signed, I didn't think about the past. I thought about systems that would actually scale, leadership that didn't flinch at capability, a team that respected history because they planned to build on it. This wasn't payback. It wasn't redemption. It was recognition. After years of grinding in the dark, someone had turned on the lights, not to celebrate, just to let me work, on my terms, with my name on the door and in the architecture. Walking out of that room, I didn't feel like I won anything. I felt like I was where I was supposed to be all along. Not because someone opened a door for me, but because I built the damn path myself, step by step, system by system. They didn't give me power, they acknowledged it, and for the first time in a long time, that was enough. I stood outside the new command center just before dawn. The concrete was cool under my boots, the air still, not a single sound, but my breath. It was quiet enough to think. I wasn't thinking about contracts or compensation. I was thinking about the shed in my backyard. The old diagrams, the sleepless nights, the work no one saw but I kept building anyway. I remembered how it felt when they tried to erase that. Not just the work, but the name behind it. But here's the thing. I don't hold grudges. They fade, they shift, they're messy. I hold receipts, because truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to wait. And when the time comes, it lands clean. I didn't win by fighting louder. I won by being ready. Not just for them, for me, for the day someone would test whether I still knew who I was. And I did. So if there's one thing I'd say to anyone listening, it's this. Stay ready. Not paranoid, not bitter, just ready. Build well. Track what matters. Stand your ground without raising your voice. Because in the end, it's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself you were always right to keep going. That's what matters. That's what stays.